Hello and welcome to the Bucketlister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bucketlister podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today I am going to be talking about the new 7 wonders of the world. And actually, they're not really new 7 wonders. The list has been out for quite some time, but in terms of history, they are the new list. And this topic came about after a conversation that I had this week with someone who, and we were discussing the podcast that I recorded last week on the research that had been done and the article that was written on the top rated 15 bucket list destinations of 2024. And the interesting thing from that list was how many as a company we were already offering. And someone asked me this week, how many of the new 7 wonders of the world do you offer on your bucket list trips? And it got me thinking, and actually out of the list of 7, 5 of them are currently bucket list destinations. Now, why is there a new list? And obviously there was the ancient 7 wonders of the world, and they consisted of the Great Pyramids in Egypt, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the statue of Zeus in Olympia, the Temple of Artemis, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Colossus of Rhodes, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria were the original ancient 7 wonders of the world. And why was there only 7? And that's mainly because the ancient Greeks believed the number 7 represented perfection. So the number 7 was a particularly significant number for them. And bearing in mind, there was a huge number of impressive ancient sites to go and see. So they had kind of brought that down to a list of 7. But obviously now it's only really the Great Pyramids that exist today. The other 6 have either disappeared or are in ruin. So back in 2000, a campaign was started to decide on the 7 new world wonders. And over 100 million people cast their votes throughout the world to whittle down over 200 places that were suggested as one of the new 7 wonders, to bring them down to just 7 as well. And then in 2017, the new list of the 7 wonders was released, featuring the landmarks that are still in existence today. So that list is still there today, and it's classed as the new 7 wonders of the world. And as I said at the start, 5 of those we already visit on bucket list trips. So what are those 7? Well, the 7 are the Great Wall of China, the Taj Mahal in India, Petra in Jordan, the Colosseum in Italy, Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, Chichen Itza in Mexico, and then Machu Picchu in Peru. And obviously some of those destinations also appeared in my list of the top 15 rated places last week. So it kind of combined nicely into doing an episode on the new 7 wonders of the world, and wondering how many of those are either on your bucket list or those that you've already ticked off already. Interestingly, we'll start with the Great Wall of China, and we actually had a trip head out to on our Great Wall of China trip yesterday. They're arriving in China today, and heading out to trek along the Great Wall. And obviously, thousands of people head out there to have a look every year. But when we put together our itinerary for the Great Wall of China, we decided that, we didn't just want to go and visit the Great Wall. And the Great Wall is, the combined length of it is huge. And that trip that headed out yesterday is being led by our guide Hugo. And I did a podcast on the Great Wall of China trip with Hugo some months ago now. But Hugo holds the world record for being the first person to walk the entire length of the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall was built over nearly 1,800 years. And it was started in round about 220 BC. And it was built as a military, it had watchtowers, and it was there to defend against invasions. And that was the purpose of the wall. And it was built in through the mountains, so it had high places where people could look out over and see that the enemy were coming. But it's actually the wall itself is made up of lots of overlapping walls. And like I say, thousands upon thousands of people go out there every year, either just to visit the wall or just to trek the wall itself. But like I said, when we put our itinerary together, we didn't just want to go to take a picture of the wall at the main part where all the other tourists are. We actually wanted to get our groups experiencing what it was like to be in some of the quieter parts of it that aren't so touristy and overpopulated with tourists. So that really is the purpose of our Great Wall of China trip. And yeah, I mean, I can't think of anyone better to lead it than Hugo, because like I said, he's got the Guinness World Record for it. Also speaks fluent Mandarin, and who better would you want to guide you along the Great Wall? So keep an eye on our social media posts over the next week or so, because I imagine there'll be some great photos coming out from that trip, and you can see what that trip looks like on our socials. The next on the list is the Taj Mahal in India, and this was never intentionally on our India trip. We were doing an India Himalaya trip, but we appreciated that actually people who were going to India would have the Taj Mahal on their itinerary. So we've now included the Taj Mahal for when people get back to Delhi to then head down and visit the Taj Mahal as well. It's just a magnificent landmark, and again, visited by hundreds of thousands of people a year. It took 16 years and 20,000 workers to build it. And it was built all the way back in the early 1600s. So it's been there, and its purpose was to house the tomb of the wife of the emperor at the time. So you've all seen the images of the Taj Mahal, and unfortunately, it's not always that easy to get images when you're there, like the ones you've seen, because it is a very well visited place. But if you're going to India, then you're probably going to want to tick off the Taj Mahal and say you've been there and seen it as well, which is why we added it to the list. Next on the list, and this one appeared on last week's list as well as a destination, and that's Petra in Jordan. You've probably seen the images of the city carved into the rock, and this was thought to have been built over 2,000 years ago by a group of people who lived within that wadi in Jordan. The city fell to the Roman Empire back in 106 AD, and then was completely damaged by an earthquake in 363 AD, which eventually resulted in it falling into disuse. But the actual city ruins were only discovered back in 1812 by a Swiss explorer. So, obviously, probably the locals knew it was there, a bit like Machu Picchu, in terms of, the locals knew Machu Picchu was there, but the rest of the world didn't. And, you can well imagine that's exactly the same with what happened with Petra. Obviously, our Jordan trip is not just about visiting Petra. It takes in so much more. But Petra is obviously somewhere that you are going to need. If you were going to Jordan, you would definitely be heading to Petra. So that's one that that's on our list of trips, and one that tops a lot of people's bucket lists as well. Number 4 on the list is the Colosseum in Italy. Now, this isn't one that we offer, and I think it's one that people could quite easily go and see themselves. So there's no point in us running a trip to go and see it. You could quite easily get a Ryanair or an EasyJet flight to Italy and pop and see the Colosseum. So, if you wanted to tick off all of the 7 new wonders, then that would probably be the easiest one for you to go and tick off and get it started if you haven't done any of them already. Again, was built between 70 and 80 AD. And again, another earthquake destroyed parts of the structure. And that was back in 1349. But despite the damage done over the years, it's been there a long time. It still is standing today, and obviously, again, is an incredibly popular tourist attraction, which is why it has remained. It's why it's come to be on the list of one of the new 7 wonders. Number 5 is Christ the Redeemer in Brazil. Obviously, this is located on the summit of Corcovado Mountain, which overlooks Rio de Janeiro. And the statue shows Jesus Christ with his arms spread over the city. The statue is 30 meters tall, and the arm span with the arms out is 28 meters. Christ the Redeemer is the newest wonder, having only been completed in the early 1930s. And obviously at the time, Brazil was predominantly a Catholic country. And that's why it's there overlooking the city. Obviously, again, a relatively easy one to go and see. Obviously, if you're going to head to Brazil, then you are going to be in Rio de Janeiro at some point on your trip. And then it is very hard for you to miss it. It is obviously Rio is on our Brazil trips. So therefore, again, you get the opportunity if you're heading with the Bucket List company on one of our trips to very easily see this wonder of the world. And like I say, it's the newest out of all of them as well. Number 6 is one we don't currently visit. So like I said, there's only 2 we don't. And number 6 is Chichen Itza in Mexico. And it was built by the Maya people over 1,500 years ago. It was a city in itself, a little bit like Machu Picchu is. And then you've probably seen, it's kind of like a pyramid-like structure. And there's 91 steps up each side. Obviously, there's 4 sides to it. And then an extra step was added to the top of the temple to total 365 steps, one for each day of the year. And again, Mexico is a destination that actually I'm currently looking at. I think there's quite a lot to go and see in Mexico. And obviously this would be the highlight of the trip, which would then basically give us 7 of the new wonders within our trips. I think we wouldn't add the Colosseum to do the 7th, but I think Chichen Itza and Mexico itself is a trip that I think we could really do something with at the Bucket List company and make a really exciting bucket list trip to Mexico. So we're looking at adding that one within the coming months. So keep your eyes peeled. And then obviously then at number 7, again, was high on the list last week. It appeared quite highly up the top of the top 15 of bucket list destinations. And that is Machu Picchu in Peru. Now, I love Machu Picchu. We've done podcasts on Machu Picchu. And obviously it's the ruins of the city from the Incan Empire that was built around about the 15th century. And the ruins are in the Andes Mountains over 2,000 meters above sea level, where Machu Picchu is situated. It's very difficult to describe Machu Picchu, really, I think, because you just cannot believe what you are walking through. And although it's not really certain why Machu Picchu was first built, whether it was there as a royal retreat, whether it was there to hide people because of its location, why it was abandoned over time. There's various rumors that it was abandoned when the Spanish came and the Inca trails were destroyed, so that it didn't, so that the Spanish couldn't find their way to get to it. Obviously, the location that it's built in, people assume that the reason why Machu Picchu was built where it was built was because of in the mountains, there was the cloud cover, so it wasn't easy to spot. But, just the way it's been built and the engineering that's gone into Machu Picchu, how they got these pieces of rock to where they got them to, how they built it. Obviously, there was no mortar back there. Every block is placed perfectly on top of each other. Is just really amazing, and one thing that I think people should go and see. It's again very, very busy and getting more and more busy. And the Peruvian government are starting to put limits on the amount of people going in there. They're putting limits on which direction you can walk around it. Like, you can't just go in. Like when I first went to Machu Picchu, you could go in, wander around, like do what you wanted while you're in there, and you had no time limit. That's now changed to you have to follow a set route. People get given different routes. When you buy your permit, you book a route to go and do it on. And you do have a time limit now. You have you only have so many hours from the time you enter to the time you leave. And this is kind of to protect it. And obviously with that many hundreds of thousands of people walking through there each year, even though it is stones and steps, they are eventually going to be worn away, and they really do want to preserve it. And it's one thing I say to people now, like when you are booking to go to Machu Picchu, really kind of understand what your ticket is going to include for when you're walking around there, to make sure that you do get the best of what it has to offer with the ticket you have. And obviously we make sure for our groups that the tickets that people have do get the full route, do get the best time in there. So yeah, just, if you're booking with somebody else, booking it independently by yourselves, just be aware that booking a ticket to Machu Picchu might not get you just where you want to go. So just double check that when you're doing it. But I think, of all of those, I think possibly my two favorites would be Petra in Jordan, and then Machu Picchu as well. And they're ones that I would, be quite happy to go back to time and time and time again. And I say, people always say to me, do you not get bored going to Machu Picchu? How many times have you been to Machu Picchu now? And do you know what? I certainly don't get bored going to Machu Picchu. And my reason for that is the fact that it's always different every time I go. And we were having a conversation about this the other day where, obviously you want to be, Machu Picchu is in the clouds. You want to see Machu Picchu. But, that's not always the case. Sometimes from the viewing platform, it's completely clouded and you don't get a great view of Machu Picchu. Other times it's perfectly blue sky. And I had a group a while ago that when we got there, it was just perfect blue sky. It was stunning. But the group were kind of moaning because they'd seen images of the cloud behind it and making it look quite mystical and magic. And they were kind of a bit disappointed that they didn't have the clouds in there. But then I've also been there as well with groups where it's been a complete fog out and, you're stood there waiting to kind of get a glimpse of it as the cloud passes through. So for me, going back time and time again, it's great seeing it in different perspectives with different weather and how it looks. So I think that would be Machu Picchu would be my top of the new seven wonders, closely followed by Petra in Jordan. But like I said, five of those destinations are included in our trips, and hopefully soon to be 6 as well. So you can, if you wanted to. There are, we're quite obviously aware that people want to tick off things on their bucket lists, and things like the 7 continents and ticking off visiting every continent is highly important on some people's bucket lists. Other people might have now the new 7 wonders of the world on their bucket list. They want to tick off all 7. I know for me that there's only a couple there for me to do. So actually, it would be worthwhile going to get those ticks. People want to go and tick off certain mountains in certain altitudes. And that's what's great about bucket lists, is that everyone has something different on their bucket list. But this is maybe something else that you could add some of these to your bucket list to get and do the 7 new wonders of the world. Anyway, I just thought I'd have a quick go through that today. And chat about what the new 7 wonders were, where they were in the world, and which ones you could do with the Bucket List Company. Hopefully you've found that useful, and maybe that's added another few destinations onto your bucket lists now. But what I will do is, in the show notes, I will put links to all of our trips that include those new wonders on them, so you can kind of see how easy it is for you to go and tick those off your bucket lists. Well, that's everything from me today. I will be back next week with another episode. So until then, thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucketlister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.